And this is the final workshop seminar at the Mary Lou Williams Women in Jazz Festival last day, and we're so glad to have you with us. My name is Candy Shannon. I moderate the discussions today, and I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists to you and then allow each of them to speak briefly, and then we throw it open to you. We're here for you. What questions can we solve? What problems can we solve for you that have to do with legal issues and jazz? Immediate, all the way to my left is Fran Richard, who is a concert vice president of concerts at ASCAP, which is a music licensing organization, as you probably know. And then next to her is Louise Holland, who is an entertainment lawyer with Allen Bergman and Associates in New York City. Louise has been a part of the music industry her whole life because her father is a professional musician, the bassist Dave Holland. She also manages artists and is the U.S. distributor for Dreyfus Jazz, a wonderful jazz label. Immediately to my right is a musician, artist, Laney Stern. She's a guitarist. She started out in the avant-garde theater in Munich, Germany. She arrived in the States to study film scoring at Berkeley. She began performing as a guitarist and formed a band. She's married to a guitarist. Music is her life. She also has had the experience of deciding that in order to do what she wants to do, she's got to form her own record company. So as we talk about the legal issues in jazz, Laney's been there, I'm sure. And then finally, a very special guest is joining us on the panel today, and I hope you will enjoy this as much as I will enjoy reading it to you. Our very special guest is the 3rd Annual Women in Jazz honoree, Ms. Geraldine De Haas. Geraldine De Haas has worn many hats. She's a singer, composer, actress, producer, director, and arts administrator, and she's never left a task undone in her long and varied arts career. She was born in Newark, New Jersey, one of 9 children, the 7th of 9 children, and she says she's very lucky. Her professional career began in 1957 with her already professional sister and brother calling themselves Andy and the Bay Sisters. Their first big gig was at the Cotton Club in Miami Beach with the fabulous Cab Calloway. From 1957 to 1966, Andy and the Bay Sisters worked at numerous clubs, halls, centers, and theaters throughout the United States, Canada, and Europe. During this period, the group appeared in a movie made in Paris and recorded 3 albums. Geraldine Bay married Eddie De Haas in 1962, and they have 2 children. The family moved to Chicago in 1968, and she resumed her career in 1970 as a solo performer. No longer seeking to become a big singing star, De Haas became involved in community and civic affairs with schools and organizations that cultivated cultural activities while continuing to perform and record on a limited basis. She returned to school in 1977 to pursue a degree in music education from Chicago State University. However, prior to her return to academia, she racked up a major achievement that became the hallmark for artistic achievement, the 1974 tribute to Duke Ellington at the Grant Park Bandshell that had previously been confined to programs featuring classical music. This jazz concert became the forerunner of the annual Chicago Jazz Festival and served as the catalyst for Chicago Fest, that blues festival, the gospel festival, and the country and western festival. Produced by an ad hoc committee of South Side musicians who came together for the purpose to commemorate the long and distinguished career of Duke Ellington, this event is repeated each April, Duke's birth month, by Jazz Unites Incorporated, an organization Ms. De Haas founded in 1981 to further the growth and appreciation of jazz and to establish a program that combines cultural goals with human, social, and economic development. Jazz Unites also conducts a lakefront, family-oriented, free jazz festival the first weekend of August each year that is held on the south side of Chicago at the South Shore Cultural Center. As a performer, Geraldine De Haas has been in To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cope, Showboat, and Hair.
Believe it or not.
Her tenure at the Illinois Arts Council, where she served as the director of the Performing Arts and Access programs, provided her with invaluable experience in arts administration while providing her with an opportunity to meet the arts community, not only in the state of Illinois, but around the United States. Her work and affiliation with the arts includes former advisory panelist for the National Endowment for the Arts, Mu Phi Epsilon, International Music Fraternity, National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, African American Arts Alliance, Center for Black Music Research, advisory board member of the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs, and the National Jazz Service Organization. She's been cited for many community service and artistic and academic achievements, and she has many, many awards, including one more this weekend here at the Kennedy Center as the honoree at the 3rd annual Mary Lou Williams Women in Jazz Festival, particularly for all of her efforts to bring this art to the general public, from little bitty children to the whole family. Ms. Geraldine De Haas. Whew. I would like, in fact, if we could start with Geraldine to just give us a sense of Jazz Unites, Inc., and the struggle that you've gone through. Talk about it for us and what the impact can be.
Well, actually, it grew out of 1974 when we did that first tribute to Duke Ellington in Grant Park. That was truly a struggle because when Duke died, people were paying tribute to Duke Ellington around the world, and even in Chicago, there were small groups paying tribute to Duke Ellington. When Muhal Richard Abrams gathered a group of Southside musicians, which included Red Saunders, he's a famous band leader who worked in the Chicagoland area, they called me in at the second meeting and they said, we should do something that's significant to Duke Ellington. And they were talking about Washington Park, which is a park located in the Hyde Park or South Side area. And I said, you know, they're doing tributes to Duke here and there and everywhere. I said, but if we're going to do something significant for Duke Ellington, we really should get the main park. Well, not being born in Chicago, I didn't realize the politics or whatever it is in that city. I mean, I had no idea that that I had to go through all that I went through. And I thought if you mentioned Duke Ellington, people would just open their arms. They ran me around like a chicken with a head cut off. But being determined and very passionate about, first of all, the music and about Duke Ellington, I wouldn't stop. I mean, you have to keep moving, as Mickey Grant wrote. You gotta keep moving. You have to continue to work at doing something that you truly believe in. And so after doing this and doing that and sending me here and sending me there, and the fact that this group that had gathered hadn't given me any kind of financial support to write letters and get a letterhead or whatever, I was writing to the Park District on anything I can find. As a matter of fact, hotel stationery that I had gotten during my travels, whatever. And so when I finally had the opportunity to meet with the big man who made the decision, and that was due to the fact that I at one time was on the board of a school called Marglow School for Retarded Children. And at this meeting, I met a banker who was the president of a bank in Chicago. And he said, gee, I know a gentleman who might be able to help you. And he called up his friend who happened to be the commissioner, one of the commissioners in Chicago, John Strozier. John Strozier called me the following day and said, meet me downtown at the Park District. And I said, well, okay. We got up, we went down to the park that following morning, and we met the General Superintendent, Edmund Kelly. This is the person that you really have to get to for a decision to be made to do a program in the famous Grant Park. I got into his office. First of all, Strozier went in and talked to him, and then they invited me in. And he said to me, are you the lady who's been writing me and bugging me? And I said, and this and that and all kinds of, I said, yes, I'm the person. When Strozier saw what I was writing, I mean, I had gotten down to notepads. I mean, whatever I can find. He said, is this what you've been writing? I mean, I said, yes. And I said, Mr. Strozier, a paper bag was next. If I had to iron a paper bag and write on that to send it, I would do that to get the communication going between the Park District and the things that we wanted to do. They gave us the park. They allowed us to have the piano. They provided all the, I mean, they were wonderful. Once we reached the main person, it was absolutely wonderful. They did everything for us. After that, they came to me and said, you want to keep doing this, you know. And it went on for about 5 years where I worked at it, but it was very hard work in terms of raising the money. And at that time, I was going to school trying to get a degree in music education. It became rather difficult because I still was not able to get the city or anybody to come in to help me to do this thing. But in a way, it's better if you raise the money from a lot of people instead of one main source, because the one main source would have control over everything you did. So we got people from a lot of people, $1, $10, $50, and that helped us to bring about where we are today in terms of, first of all, the festival in Grant Park, which was so successful, drew so many people. And as a matter of fact, Billy Taylor played the first one because he happened to be working in town at Rick's Cafe with my husband, who is a bass player. So he knows the history of the whole thing. And God bless you, Billy, because you were really terrific then and now. And that really started the whole thing.
And Jazz Unites.
Jazz Unites grew out of that when we began to do a lot of different things in terms of trying to continue what we started. Jazz Unites became an organization in 1981, because that was 1974. 1981, we became an organization. We began to do things in the South Shore community. We do a big festival there, which is this thing that we do every year. We've managed to get a terrific group of people who are, some of them are here right now, to work with us in order to do these things, not only in the schools, but in the parks and community centers, and basically to establish or to revitalize Chicago's South Side. And out of that, so many people saw what we were doing that other people began to do work and do things like the Sutherland now is being revitalized, and other areas of Chicago that were rather dormant for a while are now beginning to do things because they said, well, gee, this lady did something with nothing. Why can't we do that too? And that's what it takes, someone to begin to feel that they have to do something. You must do something in your area in order to make things happen. If not, then, you know, then the fault is with you, because you cannot depend on them or they doing something for you. It is up to each and every one of us. If we want to make this music and elevate it to the stature that it so richly deserves, then we have to do it. We must do it.
And that's what we're here to do. And let's get some good advice from the professionals we have with us. Fran, being with ASCAP, which, and the concert promoting end of things, I imagine you have to do with the licensing of music as played outside or in concert. And
ASCAP is the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, as you know, and it is the oldest performing right organization in the United States, and the only one that is governed and owned by its members. Our job is to license public performances allowable through the copyright law, and that's what we do. I am the director of concert music, which traditionally meant European classical music tradition, but I've been there since 1985. Billy's smiling, and for me, concert music means music that is seriously intended, and that includes jazz. And
Absolutely.
Duke Ellington, Dizzy Gillespie, Louis Armstrong, Billy Taylor, some of our great jazz members. And Billy and I, some of us are instigators. You know, I figure I have this color hair and you didn't have my bio. I ought to say at least that I'm a founder of what's called Meet the Composer. John Duffy and I built it. Billy been with us since the beginning. The idea is to pay composers. What I do at ASCAP is very similar to me and very comfortable, because the idea is to pay composers royalties for concerts where their music is performed. We license all the colleges and universities, radio stations, symphony orchestras, clubs, bars and grills, restaurants still. We're sitting in Washington now. Some of you know, if you do belong to any performing rights society and other organizations, that we have quite a fight on our hands to protect your rights in licensable venues, particularly commercial venues, clubs, restaurants, and the trade association are out trying to prevent that. They don't want us to license in places above a certain size, below a certain size. ASCAP was founded by the likes of Victor Herbert, Irving Berlin, and John Philip Sousa, since we're in Washington and this is where he worked hardest. The point was that there was a copyright provision right away from the beginning of the founding of this country to protect intellectual property, which is what you all create, but there was no practical way to license and to distribute income. So these guys got together and decided that they would join forces with publishers and that they would find a system by which income could be collected and then it could be distributed in an equitable way. At ASCAP, why I'm comfortable is that, especially in my end of the business, the work of the newest member, if it is exactly the same in proportion and venue, gets paid exactly the same as the oldest, most prestigious member. To me, that's a beautiful thing, and I'm very happy with it.
Okay.
If you want to talk a little bit about size, we have about 75,000 members. There are about 5 or 6, now close to 5,500 concert composers, men and women who declare that either all or part of their catalog is concert music. Where the jazz composers fit in with us is that when they write pieces that they consider concert music, we accept their definition and they file the works by registering their catalog. This is something Billy and I discussed not long ago. My first foremost plea to all of you is that the work that you create that is original must be protected, and in order to protect it at any place at all, it has to be registered. You have to confirm that this is your work, you have to name it, and you have to identify. And when you forget to do that, it's almost impossible for you to, or anybody on your behalf to protect it.
Thanks. Now, Louise, as an entertainment attorney who also has represented and represents artists, talk about who needs an attorney, an entertainment attorney? Do you have to be making lots of money, or?
If you're signing a record contract, you need an entertainment attorney, is how I should probably start this conversation. I know that many artists, when they're first starting out, don't have a lot of money, especially for a lawyer. But I cannot stress strongly enough, and it's not just because I have self-interest in this, that it's worth the money that you will spend up front to get a lawyer to look at your record contract. It's the most important contract you're going to sign as an artist, largely because it lasts for so long. If you're lucky, it will be with you for a long time. If you're unlucky, it will be with you for a long time, and it will be a bad contract. So it's worth it, even though it may seem like a large amount of money, to have someone at least go over the finer points of a contract with you. Certainly if you're signing with a major label, get a lawyer. They all know each other, they'll all deal with each other, they'll return your phone calls, and you'll be much better situated if you have someone who's inside the business who can help you through that process. I wish I could give you a lecture on what you should look for in a record contract. There are so many issues that affect so many parts of an artist's career. I will tell you that one thing that you should always try and avoid is having your record contract be more than a record contract. By that I mean, if you're signing a record contract, don't sign a publishing agreement within that record company. Don't sign a video agreement within that record contract. Don't do any of that. Make sure that the only thing you're talking about is making records. Time and time again, especially with some of the older contracts, I come across artists have signed away everything, basically. It's you know, they do videos and the record company's got an interest in them. Anything they do with their songs, the record company has an interest in their publishing. It's really quite tragic sometimes what happens to artists. Along with that, you really need to know what you're doing. You don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to be a business person, you don't have to be an accountant, but you really have to be accountable for your career. One of the things that always amazes me is when artists come into my office, and usually, unfortunately, they come in when they have a problem, instead of to say, what should I do to prevent a problem? And I say to them, well, why did you do this? And they say, oh, I don't know, I didn't even read about it, I didn't think about it, I'm too busy doing the creative thing. That's wonderful, but you have to take care of yourself, because not everybody's going to take care of you, for one thing. You don't know if you're going to have a good lawyer, a good accountant, a good manager until you find out, and until you've had some experience with them. So you really have to take accountability for yourself. And I don't understand, it seems to me particular in the jazz industry for some reason, that musicians, they don't want to deal with it. I don't know if it's a question. I mean, I know it's not pleasant. I don't like dealing with lawyers or accountants or any of them either. True, but you have to. Well, I mean, you know, there are some good ones, and there are a lot of us who work very hard. I mean, I mostly deal with jazz artists. I'm not making a ton of money off of jazz artists because you all aren't making a ton of money. I do it because I love it, just like you do it because you love it. But you have to take some responsibility over your career. I get really aggravated when artists come into my office and say, okay, I don't know what I signed, but get me out of it, or, you know, no, seriously. I think I signed an agreement that involves rights to this video, but I'm not sure. Well, what do you mean you're not sure? Look at an agreement if you get it. Don't ever sign an agreement that someone hands you when you're walking off stage. Have you had this happen to you? I bet you have, Dr. Taylor, on more than one occasion. You do a performance and someone says to you, oh, the Kennedy Center doesn't do this, thankfully. We're just filming it for educational purposes, and it won't be a problem. Could you just sign this form? And they hand you a 3-page form. Most artists, unfortunately, sign away. You know, I got a phone call from an artist the other day from Europe saying, I've just finished this performance, everybody else in the band signed this video agreement, you told me never to sign anything without calling you, so I'm calling you. I said, good move, don't sign it. He said, oh yeah, but it's, you know, it's not my band, everybody else signed it. Look, if they want your rights, they're going to have to wait for them. You have to read something. You have to give it to somebody who knows something. If you can't deal with what's going on in the contract, then ask somebody. I mean, one of the things that's great about jazz is it's a community. Someone will know what it is that you need to know about. I mean, you could answer many questions about a recording contract, I'm sure, because you run a record label. It doesn't have to be a lawyer. It can be a friend. It can be a musician with a lot of experience. The opposite end of the spectrum of the artist that comes into my office and doesn't know what they're signed is the artist who thinks they know everything. A lot of artists are very savvy and need to be in this business because you're not going to make a lot of money generally, and so it's nice if you can hang on to the money that you make. To do this, you need to know a little bit about publishing. And by the way, in conjunction with never signing a record contract that's more than a record contract, I would strongly suggest that you never give up your publishing if you're an artist. I can't think of a single good reason that anybody can give you, and I don't care how much money they're offering you, to give up your publishing. The classic story of this is I just finished reading a book about Marvin Gaye, who gave up all his publishing from the get-go. I don't even want to think about how many, and I'm talking millions of dollars it must be, that he and his estate now have just passed by for things that he created and gave his life and soul to, and it affected so many of us. Never, ever do it. Don't let anybody tell you differently. Never give up your publishing. If you want to do an administration deal, that's a different story, because you need, if you don't want to run your own publishing company, you need someone to collect the publishing royalties for you and to administer that for you. You may not have time to do that yourself. Many artists at the beginning have plenty of time to administer their publishing themselves, and it's a relatively easy process, as I'm sure Fran can speak to affiliate as a publisher and or a writer. Yeah. And I think well worth the couple $100 tops it's going to run you into.
At ASCAP, we encourage our writers to self-publish. We're a membership society, and the convention in the United States for the paying of performance royalty is that half the money goes to the publisher, half the money goes to the writer. So when you are acting as your own publisher, we encourage you to become a publishing member and to collect, therefore, all of the income to which you're entitled, or double what the writer would get. To be a full publishing member, you need to have either a recording where your name is clearly there as the creator of an original work of your own, or you need to show in some way that concert program where you are performing your own tunes. Don't forget, with jazz, you very often are playing off somebody else's tune. If you play off Ellington, Ellington gets paid. The original creator is the one that's recognized. So what we encourage, and we did it at Meet the Composer too, is for jazz writers to play their own music. The dues at ASCAP have been the same since 1914 when it was founded. $10 for a writer and $50 for a publisher. So it pays to do that, and I'll be very willing to help anyone I was wondering, as the attorney, if you would just declare for the writers here what are their rights according to copyright. You know, you jump to publishing. I'm not always sure when I deal with writers that they understand that when they join ASCAP, they give us the job to collect their performing rights in the venues the government allows. And you also, as a creator, have the right to give away the publishing rights, to give away the right for recording, mechanical, synchronization of somebody.
Can I just interrupt you?
Would you do those?
Well, I just wanted to never
give.
Well, I'm not a copyright expert. That's the first thing.
Because they have
but,
many rights, and I want them to be sure they understand what they are.
You have many rights, but one of the rights that you just talked about was mechanical royalties. Another thing, as a performing artist, you should never give away as your mechanical royalties.
That's what I was waiting for you to say.
I'm trying to give you sort of general overviews as opposed to specifics.
Right.
Mechanical royalty, loosely defined, is the royalty you get for the right to use a composition that you created, owned, or controlled on an album, to reproduce mechanically a composition that an artist owns. That's the easiest way to define it. It's a little more technical than that.
That's all right.
And basically, the record company will pay you a royalty which is based on a statutory rate for a composition. Usually, it's based on the length of time of a composition. But most record companies think that for the honor of allowing you to perform on their albums, if you use your music, you should give them a discount. I don't know why this is. It is. I don't really care who you are. You're not going to really be able to change that. With a little bit of bargaining power, you'll get a better mechanical royalty rate, but you're going to have to take a reduction somewhere along the line. That's not a problem. What's a problem for jazz artists is that they do their own compositions, most of which are over the statutory minimum, which is a 5-minute tune. So they're tied to that statutory minimum generally, yet they may have a tune quite frequently that's 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes long. So they don't get paid for the excess of that. Then they get a deduction on that 5-minute royalty, which is standard. And worse than that is they will cap your album rate. They will say, I don't care how many tunes you have on the album, and I don't care how long they are, this is how much we as a record company are willing to pay you. The other thing that's even worse than that, and I'm sorry to bear bad news about all this stuff, but they'll get you as jazz musicians, so you got to know what's going on, is most jazz musicians do standards. Great for the record company because everybody wants an Ellington song or something on their album. Great for the artist because they like to play Ellington. Bad for the artist because Ellington and his estate and his publishing company are not going to give you a reduced mechanical rate. So if you get what I'm saying here, you are tied to a minimum rate. And any song that you do outside that is going to get paid at whatever rate the publisher sets. Usually in the case of someone like Ellington, it will be a full statutory rate. meaning they'll want the full money regardless of playing time of what they're due under the statute. So what ends up happening to the average jazz musician is after everything is taken out and the record company has taken all the rest of their deductions from mechanical royalty rate, you're left with not much. And you really, really have to watch that. And unfortunately, when you're first signing a contract, you don't have a whole lot of bargaining power. That's the problem. But there are certain things you can try and do to make it better. You can try and ask to have some, either have the non-controlled songs kept out of the full album rate, so that if you do a standard, it's not computed within the rate that they'll pay on the album, or have a reduction for that. Again, it's hard to get these as a newer artist, but you don't want to have to. Yeah, you know to ask, and ask. You'll be surprised what you get when you ask sometimes. If you ask the right people and you ask the right questions, and if you ask for enough things within the context of your contract, some things are going to have to give it into you on. And this is one where you have a legitimate argument as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't understand the rationale for getting a deduction in the first place, I'll be honest.
Well, let's ask Laney Stern about her frustrations, I gather, with the record business that led to forming a record company and distributing yourself.
Well, I first have to just add to what both of these ladies said. I have a record company because I followed some of that advice. I had a lawyer when I recorded 9 records, no, wait, 8, I think somewhere around there, 4 record companies. And I've been through everything, especially what Louise said, and I have thankfully followed most of the advice. I've always had a lawyer. My parents are lawyers, so I know that if anything would have happened, I could not say, Mom, you know what happened? She would have been like, just don't even talk to me about that. You signed this, you don't know what you signed, I'm sorry. So I went to a lawyer, and she made a very good contract. When the record company failed to put out my record that they had recorded, actually that they had licensed from me and decided not to pay me for it, I had a contract that got me my masters back, which are 2 masters that I now own. So I have a few records that I will put out later on. And I just have to say, with all that Louise said of what you have to ask for and what you have to ask for, I finally said, after somebody told me that nobody wants to sign a guitar player over 40, and I'm now 46, so I asked this person, what would you like me to do? Playing guitar is what I'm best at, and I'd like to continue, but if I can't make records. So they said, well, we don't know, we're sorry. Just nobody wants to hear that. And so I started my own label, and this is the first time I've really made money, because first of all, you know, after you're like 45, you don't really want to ask if you could maybe own what you have done. It just gets harder and harder to feel any sort of self-respect under the circumstances. Thankful, if you have a lawyer, you can send Louise to do that, and she will not tell you what she heard. Yeah. But believe me, you don't want to know how they talk about the artist. They like, you know, we're like a product, and that's a very difficult position to be in. So now I have my own record company, and for the first time in my life, I'm making money. Like, I used to get point something for each record, and then I used to get these statements which would crack me up, where I owed them more than they ever give me.
Yeah.
Finally, I said, now how does that work? This is like something like in the Bible, you know, 1 fish, 10 fish. I don't know, there's some sort of funny miracle. And they said, well, we spent that money on promotion, and it's recoupable from your contract. I called my mother and I said, what the hell is this? And they said, well, I'm sorry, but that was the best we could do at the time. They're allowed to do that, so you owe them money. Now, when I sell records, I don't make point something. The worst it ever gets is $6, and that's in that's somewhere in the East countries, like in Russia. The further away it gets, the harder it gets to get more money. When I sell them off the stage, which is 50% of the sales, I make $15. My distribution, which I have in all of America, I make $7. So those are other figures you deal with. Of course, you have to make your own record, and I would like to encourage you to start making your own records right away, if you can anyway, because one of the main things that I found is you don't learn to make great records just like that. It's like your first performance on stage will be governed by nerves and by, you have to learn making
Develop.
records like you learn to play your instrument. So your first record's going to sound like your first record. And when I listen to that today, it's not, you know, it's a lot of things I would do different. And the more you go along, the more familiar you feel. And it's like your instrument. The longer you play it, the more it becomes a part of you. So if you start, you know, nowadays it's so easy to make your own record and to just document what you're doing, because unfortunately jazz is not valued for what it is. So a lot of the best performances happen in some little club somewhere, and then people say, remember 20 years ago when we used to do the show? Wasn't that amazing? And I mean, a lot of the great jazz performances we owe to people who have recorded them, like Live at the Village Vanguard, for example, and the Plug Nickel, things of Miles Davis that have just come out. Those are the best recordings. So I would really encourage you to record, to document the process, and find a way of releasing it yourself. I've put little papers out there with the main phone numbers that I find helpful on how to do it. But I'm very, very happy since I'm in charge of my own music, and I don't have to have an accountant make decisions for me. You know, it always gets, as a band leader, you get in an ethical conflict. Like when I was with record companies, they would pick a band for me of stars. Now there was the band that went through all the little dives in a bus with me, and when it comes time to do a record, they gave me somebody else.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Especially after I've worked as a side woman, and it has been done to me. So I always fought for my band. In most of the cases, I won. But you know, all of this fighting takes a lot of energy out of you, and it's very difficult to, you know, I have that sort of nurture. When you tell me I have to do something, I can't. So, but not everybody is like that. So a lot of unhappiness is there that's for no reason. You can really go and be in charge of your own music if you, you know what Louise said, if you just take charge, if you find out a little bit what it takes to make your own record, and then you can go to the record companies as a partner, which is what I like to call a level playing field, where you say, you go back to Louise and you say, well, this is what I would like to negotiate. And all of a sudden, the world looks completely different.
Completely.
Believe me, completely different. I mean, and I have to say, one more thing, if you don't want to do what, believe me, I'm not a businesswoman. I'm not really good at that. I was just told I can't do what I do, so I had to. So it doesn't really take, it's not difficult to make records. The record business is very easy, and if you just ask for questions, it can be done. If I can do it, you certainly can do it. And I'm a real wuss with negotiating. I'm not good. I'll say, okay, and then I'll go on and say, like, oh, shit. That is how a lot of this works. It's really easy, and it can be done. It can be done wonderful. The thing about the publishing, I want to say, my lawyer told me, don't ever sign your publishing. And you wouldn't believe how forceful these negotiations can be, and how, when these things get handed to you after a performance that you have to sign away rights, this gets into like screaming arguments behind stage. So get ready. The best I could do at some points was to, I had to sign away my publishing because they had me cornered. I was in a situation where I had started the records. I had to pay people. They said, you're not going to get your money if you don't sign this, which is completely illegal.
Oh, yeah, awful.
It's horrible, but it'll happen. And you're like right in the middle of playing and you don't know what to do. But my lawyer at the time got it so that agreement ends after 5 years, which, like, for the record company, that's a real stupid thing they did. But, you know, if you get your lawyer in there, there is a way. Even if they say there is no way, you can always find it. I had to sign another contract, which can be revoked every 6 months, which is, you know, it's very unusual to get these things, but you can always find some way if you have good advice. You're not alone in this.
Let's go to questions. Anyone?
My name is Vanessa Ruben, and I record for RCA. I've been on there for maybe 5 records now. I've been lucky, pretty lucky over there, because they have never really interfered with my projects in terms of, you know, telling me who to play with and so forth. The company has changed, however, so I'm thinking about trying to go somewhere that kind of
They just had
is
a big turnover.
interested with, yeah, they've had a lot of turnover there. You answered my first question regarding the control composition clause. I hate it.
So do I.
But I was going to ask you, is that is it pretty standard, which I guess it is, but unless you come in with a lot of bargaining power, you're not going to get it out.
You're not going to get it out full stop.
You're not gonna
unless
get
you're
it.
a Sting
Yeah.
or a Paul McCartney, and even then, I think that they've probably got some limits in there somewhere. Record
Yeah,
companies
so
being
it's
what
real
they are.
important if there are any artists here, make sure you know what a control composition clause means, because I wasn't sure on a record, and I put too many songs, one song too many on the record,
But
with
see,
one
you
of
shouldn't
my
have to worry
own.
about that.
I know, you know, I can't tell you how many artists have made, and sometimes it only happens once, because once you make that mistake, you never want to make that again. One too many songs on the record with my original. Guess who didn't get paid?
Well,
Me.
you know, you could have ended up, it actually can get so bad that you end up owing money.
Yeah.
If you do a lot of long standards, you can actually be in a position where you owe the money.
Luckily, they were not that long. But I hate it every time I get that record and I look at it and I go, it's my first tune on here that I did everything for, and now I don't get paid. Very stupid.
Yeah.
Please, no.
Well, I wish I could tell you that there was a way as a new artist that you can avoid it, or even as a mid-level artist that you can avoid it. You can't avoid it. You can only seek to minimize it.
You can seek to minimize it.
Try
by
and make
knowing.
sure that the number of compositions on the album totally is maybe 11 or 12, so that you do have some leeway there. Try and argue that you want to get, you'll take a minimum rate, but it has to be a full statutory rate.
Right.
So they at least pay attention to the timing of the songs that are involved.
Right.
If you're dealing with a major and you're a new artist, I hate to tell you, but you can probably forget it.
Yeah.
I mentioned before, trying maybe get an exclusion for a non-controlled composition or for long-playing compositions. But basically, and this is one of the reasons I say get a lawyer if you're negotiating a contract like this, is that lawyer that's talking to the record company lawyer is going to have known him for a long time and dealt with him before, and they're more likely to do a favor and be flexible on that issue for their friend Alan, who's my boss, or their friend, you know, Noel, or their friend whoever, than they are going to be for an artist or a manager who's trying to argue a contract, to negotiate a contract for an artist, which, by the way, I think is an awful idea. I am a manager as well. I would never do a contract for one of my management clients, because the manager has to work with the record company. The lawyer company is supposed to do the best they can for the artist and fight with the record company if necessary.
Yeah, it can be a conflict of interest
It can definitely
for
be
some
a conflict
people,
of
yeah.
interest.
My next question is regarding the publishing. I see that, well, let me ask you how you feel about managers having clauses in their management contracts for 15% or some percent of an artist's publishing.
I'm glad you mentioned that. The manager is actively involved in their artist publishing. I am in mine. I think a percentage is fine. That's up to you to negotiate it. However, what I'm finding more and more often is that managers are not involved at all in their publishing, other than perhaps copywriting tunes and things like that. But they're getting a percentage of what can turn out to be
And
substantial
when you say
money.
actively involved, what does that mean?
That means running the publishing company, doing everything. It can mean whatever you want it to mean in a management contract, and the percentage should be based on that. It can mean anything from just doing the basic administration, filing the copyrights, registering with ASCAP, all that stuff, making sure the statements are correct, to actively going out and seeking publishing deals for you.
Okay.
Publishing, I should say, opportunities for you.
Okay.
Be they sub-publishers or licensing agreements, anything like that. And the level of activity, this is completely my opinion, that your manager takes is what your percentage that you pay them should be based upon.
Because I thought that made sense to me for artists that have very large catalogs, because I guess you do need a lot of someone to work that catalog, or, you know, if you're not a member of Harry Fox or some of these kind of organizations that see about collecting your monies. But for an artist that really doesn't have a very large catalog, you can send in your own registration forms.
Yeah, you can.
And go to ASCAP and be involved in their meetings and read all the literature and really do a lot of that kind of administration for yourself.
And you should, but a lot of artists
Yeah.
just don't.
I myself had found myself in a contract of which it was deemed an adhesion contract, where the attorney had all the rights, rather the agent had all the rights, and I had none. And then my attorney watched me walk into another contract prior to her consultation and convinced me that don't ever call me again if you're going to do this without consulting me first. It's really important, because we can be adhered to or glued to contracts that don't suit our needs. And just to commend Lenny also for taking the steps and finding your way. It's really marvelous. because the results are almost immediate. You know,
Yeah,
as you
they
said,
are.
it's not as complex as it is in working with a record label.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Maybe it's hard to see the figures when I said you make 0.96 cents and you make $10. When I sell 3,000 records, which is not much, I make about, depends on which territory, but I make around $28,000. So that allows you to go talk to Louise.
Well, 0.96, even if you were under a contract, 0.96, 96 cents is high.
Yeah, that's a
You're
good.
not making
that's
96 cents an album.
I had a lawyer to negotiate my record companies when I was in. And I also want to say I'm not alone. One of the numbers here is the Association of Independent Record Companies. So we formed an association where there is all kinds of advantages, that all kinds of people that will help you out. The best part about it is that we have a mentoring program. So you can call as an artist and become of that program. You give other record companies advice. If you're a singer, for example, if they have a problem in the studio with the singing, they can call you and you can coach them. If you have some distribution problems, somebody will guide you through it. If you're completely new, you'll get an older record company who will, get you on your way.
Also, New York Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts is a great resource, because I'm a member of Atlanta Lawyers for the Arts, and I can go in and use their library and research all I want and become familiar with the lingo, become familiar with the terms and what to look for.
Right.
So those are great resources that are just minimal fees to join.
And that's what you need, just
Yeah.
become familiar with it. You don't have to be an expert, you just need to know what people are talking about and what issues to look out for.
Hands. And while Amy's going, does your company release other artists other than Laney Stern?
Not yet, because we're a very small company yet.
Do you
but
recommend people be independent, everybody form his or her own and release? Or do you think that people should still come together under good circumstances?
I think people should come together, but they shouldn't come together in this sort of parent-child relationship. Where the record companies and we expect things from them to do. A lot of things that we expect from them, they really aren't able to do. There's a lot of things you have to do for yourself. I would recommend that we all have to, that's why we have the coalition of independent record companies. You have to be, you can't just go out like a warrior on your own. It's much better if you form a group, if you form an association. But I would encourage you to see one project through from beginning to end, because that is the greatest learning experience that you will ever have.
Electronic rights, how do you handle the distribution also? Was that part of the question of?
A handle from a legal perspective, the record companies addressed this a while ago, because they pretty much cover any sort of way you can get a record out in their contracts. And I'm quite sure that all the rates that they're talking about for electronic transmissions are reduced rates. And they're still going to take the customary deductions that they take from your royalties, such as packaging, even though there's no packaging. So this is going to be an issue. No, it's true. So this is going to be an issue that I think is going to be litigated quite a bit with some of the big-time people as the web starts taking off and taking. I mean, that's one of the things you have to remember, is that I think what you're doing it at a perfect time. Record companies, as we know them, thank God, I think, pardon me, are going to lose their power, because everybody's sick, especially in the jazz community, of what some record companies do to the artists. And there are so many ways for an artist to take control now and get their product out to people that they can, in many instances, can and should bypass a record company.
Let's just talk about the electronic, the internet, and there are licenses already in force for certain kind of internet transmissions. But this is a very new field. People don't like to pay licenses. It takes a lot of sometimes of fighting. ASCAP, for example, is still in litigation with cable television, which has been around since 1979. People don't like to pay. The question of the internet has to do with two things that are fascinating. One is, am I tuning in and hearing, or am I tuning in, listening, and downloading? Because if I'm downloading your music, that's not just a performance, but it's a distribution, right? It's like selling a recording. So these are kinds of issues, and it's new, and we're all wrestling with it, and in some places we have already acceptance. but in other places we're going to have a fight on our hands. What I'm saying is that you know from this panel that the myth that artists should know nothing about business is dead. The myth that that everybody is fair and nice and even, that every opportunity is a great one for you, is wrong. So you have to now look into new uncharted territory to see whether you're in fact giving away without realizing it, and not only can't recover, but it's forever out of your control. And this is the concerns we have with some of the technology right now. No answer yet for sure.
I have an answer to the distribution part.
Hi, my name is Bobby Humphrey, and I'd just like to reiterate some of the things that I heard, particularly from you, with reference to ownership of record label. I've had my own label now for 5 years. President Bobby Humphrey Music is one of my production companies, but the label is called Paradise Sounds Records, and I was the first female signed to Blue Note Records in its history in 1971. So I've been with Blue Note, I've been with Epic, and all of them were very good in a sense in terms of establishing Bobby Humphrey, the name, the product. However, in terms of the music business, that second part of it, it's like going to undergrad school. So in that sense, the record labels certainly serve that purpose in terms of me learning the business, getting my name out there, and once the name was a world-known name, I saw no reason to continually get statements that were continuously in the negative. I like to have a lot of fun, but at the same time very serious. I said, you know, if I'd like to get a book of fiction, I'd rather pick it out myself at the library, which essentially most statements are, because you deal with two things. You're dealing with the honesty of another individual, not calling any names, and also it's a matter of business and the word recoupment. I'm currently writing a song called Requiem for Recoupment. Okay? But in terms of the record labels, I'm having a very good learning experience. I'm in grad school now, going for a PhD in that sense, and that I am finally making money. Everybody says, Bobby, you have a whole sense of calm about you. Besides going to Tobago and just writing my music and actually earning money and learning the business workings of it, it's a level playing field in two senses. Technically, the advent of digital recording, the home recordings that you can go in and make a record for very, very little money. Secondly, alternate types of distribution with the internet. I'm getting a website, but I have a 1-800 number now, 1-800-Ms. Flute. I have a mail order going, so it's really good. And certainly, as opposed to getting a contract that offers 13%, and you only get that at your recoupment rate, whereas they're recouping at 100%. In order to pay that line of credit back, it could be in perpetuity. That's a line you should really remember. It will be. And I'm just really learning. It's a learning experience, and certainly to be able to get $8 from a distributor or $10 or direct sales in terms of concerts, $15, mail order, $15 plus $3, shipping and handling, $18. It's something, it's a good feeling as an artist to really participate and finally get paid for your art. Thank you.
Yeah, Bob.
We have only 10 minutes more, so we'll ask more questions, but I wanted Laney to speak to distribution, because for all the independent record producers and creators that we are creating here today, what do you think should you own your distribution, or can you do that yourself, or how?
No, well, Bobby actually mentioned the main things, the 1-800 number, your own website that you can set up, and there is several ways you can do it. You can either have people pay with a credit card on the internet, which is a little bit more complicated. I don't know how you do it, Bobby. We have a number where they call and we send it, which is sort of like an extension of the mail order, but there is new ways of actually doing it directly with the credit card, because, and that's a very promising thing for the future. At the AFIM conference that I was at 2 weeks ago, we had panels speaking about that, and they said that they did a survey of young kids, which is who we all want to introduce to jazz, and I think they took 100 kids, and some something like 10 of them had been to a record store and 40 had been on the internet, because that's what the kids like to do, is surf. Of course, now there's the problem of them shopping, and they're developing a thing where the parents can give an allowance with a credit card so the kids can shop. They're doing it. It's called like Wallet. All the people from Liquid Audio. I mean, there is also a bunch of companies. The first one that was famous was Liquid Audio, that you pay them money. Actually, it's about $900. You get the software, so you can people can download directly from their computer and burn their old CD burns. That's the new thing. Everybody's going to make their own CDs. And
Well, it's going to be standard sooner than you think.
Yeah, but
Which
there
is
is
actually very
already-
good for an artist who
Yeah,
wants to
it's
start
great.
their own record company. It's cutting the record companies right out of the picture, if
Right.
you think about it.
But you have to watch it. Aside from Liquid Audio, there is like right afterwards, I got approached by companies who are doing it for free. So shop around and see what's available.
Sorry.
Would you talk a little about Meet the Composer? Because I think in this particular group, you have information that would be very helpful. For instance, many of us who have been commissioned to write music for various purposes have given it all to the copyists, because we didn't negotiate some of the things that are in a very handy booklet that you have put out. And anything along those lines, I think, would be very helpful to jazz writers.
Meet the Composer is at 2112 Broadway in Manhattan. It is a national organization that is involved with paying fees to composers. And at a particular time in our history, we saw how composers were being fleeced. That you get a commission fee to write a specific work, but if you needed the paper and the parts for other instruments in an ensemble to put it up on music stands, that money that it costs to do that, to prepare the score, extract the parts, is what Billy's referring to, can cost you more than your commission fee. So at one point, John and I, we decided that we would make a brochure about commissioning. And included in that would be the sound advice to anybody who was flush enough to commission you, to say that the commission fee is to create the work. There has to be separate and apart from that additional money to prepare the score and parts for performance. We tried to fake out our part of the world that was a little bit more powerful than we were, and to teach them a lesson in good manners and in how to treat creators. I thought we'd end up in cement shoes in a week, but we didn't. Our commissioning handbook is still available. You can get it from Meet the Composer. They have a phone number, or you can call me. I have lots of copies, whichever.
I'm really sorry to have to bring it to a close, but we can repair to the lobby.
Sure.
And grab who you need and keep it.